We're Dog Kennel Hill Project. I'm Ben Ash.
I'm Henrietta Hale, and we also have a third person, Rachel Lopez de la Nieta, and we form a collective group of dance artists, we would call ourselves, isn't it? And that means that we're individual artists that work separately a lot of the time, but also come together in collaboration. And there's a whole spectrum of that, how those roles get mapped out, really. So one extreme is that we may make work that's completely collaborative. That means that we've got three distinct voices merging. Other models are that one of us takes a lead and the other two are sort of involved in, still collaboratively, we would still call that collaboration, but that there's a sort of directorial overview. And other forms are that we tend to make pieces of work, say, individually, but that another person will sort of be an outside eye or give a sort of what we would call dramaturgical response.
Like a dialogue, constant dialogue.
So there's a sort of constant dialogue, and in other ways we all often sort of have a sense that we can sort of steal each other's ideas. So one person will make something and another person will respond and take a certain idea that they may not want to take further, and so that's...
Yeah, sort of push it in a new direction or something, yeah.
So I was approached by Kirsty, the curator, because I knew her from a situation where I'd worked with another visual artist, Matty Brown, on a theatre piece, and that was a collaborative process. And Kirsty invited me to respond to this work by Claire Barclay, and I think the process evolved that Claire and I met, and I think there was a kind of connection there, just in the way we talked about how we approach working, and the questions that arise out of work felt quite similar. A lot of the sort of issues that we deal with. So it kind of evolved from there, really, and at the time I was involved, we were all involved in a sort of research project called People Working Project that dealt with looking at the concept of work, and I was interested in speaking to Claire a little bit about her processes in making the work and sort of understanding those and sort of seeing the relationship between our process and making work. So it started off as a kind of interest in each other's process and has since evolved into more of a sort of making a piece of work in response that's slightly sort of allowing it to be independent of Claire in a way. So yeah, the initial thing that sparked me, or the relationship that I felt between Claire's work and some of the interests that I have in making work were to do with this sort of ambiguity of referencing that she uses, and I found it really playful, and there's a sort of, I mean, even she uses these words, a sort of childlike quality about how she plays with, for instance, things like textures. So she'll create an image of a brick wall on a very sort of soft, tactile texture, and there's these constant contradictions in the work and labels that don't quite make sense, and I really enjoyed that, and I feel that that's something that I tend to work with in body imagery a lot, in terms of sort of creating references that pertain to some kind of meaning, but then you always sort of slightly flip it or confuse it. So I really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed there's a sort of formalness linked with a kind of abandonment of imagination that I think feels really recognizable for me. So for this particular situation, for these 2 weeks, we decided that in order to approach making a piece of work, we wanted to spend time in the installation. And a sort of intensive period of time, because I feel like those kind of intense periods always take you somewhere that you don't expect beforehand, so it becomes a more experiential experience as opposed to an intellectual ideas-based response. So we're currently in the middle of this 2-week public process, and part of that reason that we decided to make the process public was the necessity and the fact that we could never have enough time when the gallery was closed, but it was also partly at the time an interest because, again, going back to this idea of people working, we kind of were interested in placing ourselves in that frame of just people who are working in a space and making that a witnessable activity, and just, you know, it's up to people that come in just to decide whether it's performance or not, or whether they, you know, how they choose to read it or how they choose to frame it. And I think we were just quite interested that as a sort of experiment for ourselves as well, to really sort of see how much we could inhabit that public space in a sort of supposedly natural working way, or how much of our normal process we would let go of. So that was kind of the setup, and then since we've been working here, the process of it has involved. Well, on the first day we took a walk around the area, and that was partly in response to having spoken to Claire, who also said she dealt with some of the sort of Whitechapel location for her work as well as this actual space, and I just felt like it would be nice to mirror that. And so we took this walk in the area and kind of made it quite specific, so gave ourselves quite a specific task and things to sort of look for within ourselves, so within our own internal experience of where we were, but also within what we saw. And we sort of created, I think, 5 incidences, or a map or a journey for ourselves, and that sort of physical map is then something that we then respond to physically or kind of abstract for ourselves to create states, you could call them, or movement patterns, or things that pertain to a rhythm or a sensation. So we begin to work with that kind of a palette, and then we...
Sort of like inhabitings or something,
yeah,
in a way.
Sort of inhabitings. And then once you sort of look at those things, they all have a form. They all have a sort of natural form or rhythm to them.
Or a temperature.
Or a temperature, yeah, exactly. And then we begin to sort of mould that form and apply different kind of structures to it. And so we're kind of building this, we're still in the process of building this palette of our own kind of physical material, and then seeing it in relation to the work as we place it in different parts of the work then also has another effect.
Because I think we were clear, weren't we, that that we sort of wanted to bring something in with us, as opposed to sort of, you know, maybe just working with a response to the work itself, you know. Yeah. I think on a personal level, there's probably quite a strong desire in me to kind of want to be able to be sort of authentic or really true, you know. So my kind of projection of what I might like to succeed in or achieve in terms of being in this process within a public space might be the same kind of, actually like a clear kind of sense of being like absorbed and kind of free and trusting in the way that I might be in a studio, where really it's like, you know, we're not viewed. But then actually being here and doing that is just kind of, for me, it's about understanding and accepting that that's something that I might want to do, but it's just not possible, because I'm affected by kind of people in the space viewing and stuff. But it's been so varied as well. I mean, I just think that yesterday we had some people who saw that we were, perhaps not just being pedestrian, and they sat down on stools and actually said to us at some point, do something. And we were talking at that point, and I did reply that we were talking and sorting something out, and that we were doing something. And yet at other points I've been in an activity in the space, and someone's just been in and kind of being with the work and almost ignoring us, or just kind of aware of us peripherally, but not engaging us as their primary focus. And that's really like the span of how people are with us within the space and the work is really, really interesting, and I appreciate that.
It's really great that we've titled it in this way, because I keep having to remind myself that is the title, that the title is People Working, and so therefore that's what we are. And it kind of, to keep reminding myself, that just gives me that liberation to sort of just be present with what it is that we're doing. Because I was, again, like you say, there's this sort of knowledge that you know that working in a public space is going to be a certain way, but the actuality of it still, there's still always this sort of little voice in your head that sort of, you know, maybe comes from your, you know, some trauma you had in your childhood that sort of goes, oh my God, you need to be doing something, you know, someone's watching, they're finding this really, you know, this sort of expectation or this projection that you have of what people want. And it kind of brings up this whole thing of real, not real as well, which I think is also a really nice thing about the public process, because of we being real, or Ben used the word authentic or true, and I often find that quite an enjoyable concept, because you sort of go, what does it mean to not be real? You know,
what am I performing, or what am I performing? Because it's kind of like, I mean, we're doing the process to then make a piece which we're going to show 3 times an evening, over 2 evenings, yeah, a half-hour piece probably. But there's kind of another piece or work, which is the process itself and us working, and I think that just so connects directly back to where we've been coming from in terms of this research, looking at people working. And
I can actually remember one of the key questions that used to be around, or still is around, but was one of my early lists of questions around people working, was this, what does working look like? And I just found it such a sort of absurd question, because but if you were to try and sort of photograph people at work, what would that actually look like? And this is sort of coming close to that, because it just looks like nothing in some ways. Yeah.